good surgeon lays tissue next to tissue and sews it together so that the body that God made to heal can do its thing. So that's physical healing. We were designed to heal physically. But our penchant for healing is not confined to the physical alone. We're also wired to heal emotionally. Conceptually, it's similar to the physical. We need to get the bad stuff out of the way and get the healthy systems in place. As counselors, we do this all the time through various means by eliciting emotions and or thoughts, bringing them up to the conscious level many times so that we can begin the reprocessing of those thoughts and emotions. Again, a bit of a mouthful, more than we're going to get into today. But in many ways, we're identifying the bad stuff and getting it out of the way. Or at least so that we can intentionally give preference to something that will facilitate health and healing. So that's beyond the scope of what we're doing. But suffice to say, what is true for these bodies physically is also true of our emotional selves. We were wired to heal. We don't have to teach a baby. Pardon my formality this morning, and this is only going to last a little bit longer, and then we're jumping to some Q&A, which flow a little bit more naturally. What's true of God's design in the physical and the emotional is also true of his design relationally. We don't have to teach a baby to connect with her mother. For those who have experienced it, no one had to teach you how to fall in love, right? It's as natural as the renewing and the knitting of our skin underneath the Band-Aid. So object lesson number 2, we're designed to heal physically, emotionally, relationally. It's natural. It's part of God's design. We just have to get the junk out of the way. God's design can take care of the rest. So let me bring the 2 object lessons together to set the stage for what we are talking about today. I'm going to flash back briefly to last week. If you were here last week, you learned a bit about connection from Levi and Heather. They introduced this rope as a representative of that connection, and it's necessary for human flourishing as food and water. So if you remembered last week, Levi and Heather talked about these knots, right? It's not a perfect illustration, but it's a good one. These represent the junk that gets in the way of healthy healing. They refer to the Gottman's work of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Very ominous sounding thing. Specifically criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Those are good labels, good descriptions of some of the things, some of the bad stuff that gets in the way of healthy connection, right? So let me share one more illustration, a personal one. About 30 years ago, when my wife and I lived in Longview, Texas, up in Northeast Texas, a friend of our church, was moving to Atlanta, Texas, not Georgia. It's about a 70-mile drive up in Northeast part of the state. We were a bunch of young families kind of scraping by, and we didn't have many resources. And our friend actually had a car that wasn't running that she needed to get towed. So a couple of us guys offered to help. I had a buddy who had a pickup truck. I had a tow strap. So it was a comedy of errors. My wife and I had some good laughs kind of remembering that. It wasn't my intention, but in the process, I got a knot tied in that tow strap. You can imagine 70 miles later that knot was a fixture of that rope. I still have that strap. I didn't bring it today. I couldn't find it, which is probably not a bad thing. The knot's still there 30 years later. So some knots are simple, right? Like these. Just some time. Simple as that. I just made this one a few minutes ago, right? Those are the easiest to untie. Catch them early before you drive 70 miles or 70 years. And that gets us closer to the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. Solomon and his Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, the 22nd book of our Old Testament. Solomon wrote about tending the garden. When you're gardening, you don't wait until the weeds are bigger than your crop before you pull them out. You water and you care for your crop attentively, proactively. For the accountants and financial folks in the room, let me use a different phrase. Keep short accounts. Don't let the debts keep accruing and the interest keep growing until your service on the debt is larger than your income. Address it early when the knot is still supple, when the debt is still fresh, when the argument is still young. There are a lot of ways of getting at that. So let me give you a simple description of how I go about that as a counselor, as I come alongside couples. So first, we work to identify cycles of disconnection so that we can get the junk out of the way. Now, let me show you a couple of cartoons that are simple, poignant illustrations of this. So on the left, what he heard was, "You're too stupid to be trusted driving alone in bad weather." On the right, what she actually said was, "Drive carefully, dear." Ladies, you're not off the hook. On the left, what she heard was, "You don't expect me to take care of the kids, clean the house, and make dinner, do you?" On the right, what he actually said, "Feeling any better, honey?" How many can relate? I can. There's no doubt a lot of history that is not represented in those two clips. History that may not have anything to do with him or her. It may be part of their story before they even met, right? Those patterns often start early. Then again, it could be rooted in hurt and pain from earlier in their relationship. Regardless, it becomes a cycle of disconnection that we get stuck in, and a genuine reach, a genuine act of compassion, it gets lost. It doesn't have a chance to change the course of the relationship. So the second thing that we aim at is to work to develop new ways of communicating that I refer to as connecting conversations. So when we feel connected to someone, the relationship can tolerate a lot more strain. So I recognize bridging those two concepts together can be complicated and hard. This is truly where the hardest work is done, but it can be done. Okay, so bear with me as I introduce one more concept that we'll use as a backdrop for some Q&A, which I hope to be the meat of what we're doing here today. With a hat tip to Tommy Nelson and his sermon series on the Song of Solomon back in the 90s, let's take a look at seasons of marriage. I'm not just going to read through the next few, I am going to read through the next few slides, and I'd like you to soak each one in for just a moment, okay? And consider what each season might look like, what it might feel like. So season 1, attraction and pursuit, the spark, being drawn, exploring character beyond looks and appearance. Season 2, dating and courtship, developing relationships, setting patterns, clarifying purpose and direction. what might that look like? What might that feel like? Season 3, marriage and intimacy. Transition into marriage and deepening relational and physical intimacy. Season 4, conflict and growth. Recognizing that happily ever after still involves friction. Learning how to fight fair and how to heal wounds. Season 5, deepening and faithfulness. A mature phase, sustaining romance, working out commitment, legacy of relationship. Season 6, renewal and legacy. When marriages last, reinvigoration, mentoring other couples, passing along wisdom. Season 7, saying goodbye. Grief, loss, and the pain of goodbye. So this is where I'd like to shift gears. I'd like to open up to some Q&A for us to discuss together what cycles of disconnection come up for you in different seasons, as well as what connecting conversations might look like. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions, because me standing behind a podium is painful for me, if that's not obvious so far. I'm curious what questions y'all might have, though. As you kind of look through those seasons, think about your own story. Think about what those two cartoons, I identify with that. That feeling of disconnection. What kind of disconnection comes up? And how do you bridge that? How do you work through that disconnection and actually get to something that feels like connection, right? Curious if anything comes to mind. Any thoughts? If you do have a question. Yes, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'll repeat your question, I guess. Okay. Thank you.
Have those
Gotcha.
times of miscommunication, not hearing what was said.
Yeah.
For me, it literally is, I'm deaf in one ear. So
Yeah.
that's a good excuse and also a very sad reason. Something I do need to deal with. And there are times that I intentionally misinterpret what she says.
Mm.
We can laugh it off. It's, oh, that's what I thought I heard you say, because I can't hear very well. But there are times where I very much, I deliberately misinterpret something, put my spin on it. Sometimes it's a positive spin. Quite often, it's a negative spin.
Yeah.
And it's somewhat intentional, not to inflict pain, but to, I can't really say why.
Yeah.
Maybe to sort of insist or show my own way is maybe better.
Yeah.
I know it's not loving. So I would like to do less of that.
Certainly. Yeah. And don't go too far from them, because you may not want me to come back to you. But thank you, because what you're describing, I hear some wisdom. Y'all kind of thought through and talked about this to some extent. And I recognize that there's still some pain there. I hear it in your voice, right? And I wasn't looking at your wife at the time, but yeah, those are the things that are painful, right? And there's some of that for you sounds like probably defensiveness, right? Maybe this touches on a raw spot for me that's too painful, and And it's just easier to just kind of spend that so I don't have to, I can just avoid it, right? But that's one of those cycles of disconnection, right? Because as you choose to avoid that, it keeps you at a distance, right? And so finding those ways back to one another. Hey, honey, I'm sorry about what I said earlier. I was doing that thing again, right? What I really want is to be close to you, right? Yeah, can we try this again? And those are my words. That's how I might say it, but yeah.
So what I really want is to understand what she was meaning and wanting, and I also want to be understood and able to say what I was meaning and wanting. Neither one of those intended to be selfish, but simply honest and authentic.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you again for that follow-up, because when we're touching defensiveness, we're activating that part of our nervous system that is, we feel the anxiety, we feel the, you've heard fight or flight. I just need to get away from this. A lot of times what we need right there is to incorporate ways for us to just slow down, right? And communicating about that, kind of having those conversations. Hey, when this comes up, this is what I want to do. I want to slow down, and this is how I want to do it, right? But slowing down and allowing that defensiveness to pass, right? So that you can then start reaching. Yeah. Thank you.
One final thought, I just said in the letter.
Yeah.
Very fortunately, through God, my wife and I are both able to come back to each other and say, hey, honey, I'm sorry. I said something wrong or hurtful to you, or I said something that wasn't understood, or I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you were saying and meaning expressing. So I'm very blessed that both my wife and I have learned to do that. We're not perfect at it, we'll do it all the time, but that kind of wraps it back up.
Yeah. And that's what I was referring, the deepening faith, the renewal and legacy. I hear that in your story. Y'all, that took some humility originally, I expect. Eating some crow at some point, right? And we all do it, right? We have to find that humility. I think we have one more question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'm not as well spoken, but kind of dovetailing in, I'm the type that would say, how do we reduce her saying, drive safely here 90% of the time? Following up on what he said, one of my issues is lack of patience and repetition. Because of that, saying the same thing over and over, the same question, the same scenario, drives me absolutely wild. I was telling my family I need to go to counseling because after a couple of times, communication goes away because I kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And the other day they were talking about men in box and ladies spaghetti.
Spaghetti, you bet.
And I'm going, is that right? She didn't say yes or no, but yes or no question.
Maybe. Could be.
But my problem is, if you shut down, then we go from there.
Yeah.
And I don't totally shut down, but then it becomes kind of not positive. It should. I mean, we're on the same page, but we just don't talk the same.
Sure. Yeah. You feel that distance. And again, you've already put a lot of work into, and you are aware that when she says drive safely, dear, or whatever the phrase might be.
That was a joke.
Right, yeah. Yeah. You feel that irritation, right? And the repetition, that irritation comes up and you act on it, right? That's that cycle of disconnection. I'm not going to go into and try to work with you right now in front of everybody as to where that right, where that irritation might be coming from, but it's certain. I talk about raw spots, right? It's a raw spot that she touches with a genuine question or a comment, right? No. Yeah. Me, if I keep poking on you. Yeah. Yeah. Can I finish up one more thought though? Because that thought that you have put into that, right? That's the important piece that I will often talk about sober conversations with, it doesn't have anything to do with chemicals or alcohol. Sober conversation is a conversation that you have about the big emotion, like the irritation, when the big emotion is not present. So setting aside time to sit down and say, hey, honey, I know that I get irritated again. And can we just kind of map out what that could look like? That's not the response I want to have, but it's automatic. I mean, it just comes at, right? And it's almost like I can't not do it. But when that emotion is not big in your chest and you have some distance from it, in that sober conversation, you can think a little more clearly, right? So I would encourage those are the conversations to come back to, right?
Part of it is I realize it,
Yeah.
and I know I need to work on it, but I haven't improved on it. And I didn't mean it like this when it hurt out, because I was really good with my children, repetition on the phone, those things.
Yeah.
So I get frustrated with myself because I haven't made progress like I would like.
Yeah, I'm not very good with my illustration here, but yeah, I mean, that's one of those knots that's been there for a while, right? And pretty taut. Yeah. So, and those are the ones that it takes some work to get out. I was Navy. I worked alongside Deck Division and they would do amazing things with lines. They would get a knot in it, it would get tension on it, which those kinds of tensions, you get all kinds of forces. A lot worse than my 70-mile knot on that toe strap. But they would soak them in water and they would take a marlin spike and work those things out, right? I don't know. I like that illustration because it just reminds me that, hey, there's hope even for those 70-year knots, right? Maybe I shouldn't use 70 years. No offense. Sorry. Yes, sir.
So I was kind of thinking about this, talking, like, comments got morphed a little bit as we discussed it.
Okay.
But I think, we've been married now for 33 years. And the two things I would say keep us together is forgiveness and grace. Without those two, I think we're always going to disagree. We're two different people. We don't exist in the same brain.
Yeah.
We accept that. And if we're going to have disagreements, we're going to have, and they're intentional, they're bad, there's nothing wrong with disagreements. Try how to figure out how to get through those in a constructive fashion is a challenge.
Yeah.
Sometimes. But again, sometimes the only thing you got left is forgiveness and grace.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm at.
Can I use that to segue into? I'm not leaving. We're staying with Q&A for a bit, but that is a beautiful illustration. I use the illustration rupture and repair. What you just described are these small ruptures in the relationship. But when you work out, you actually push weight. You're actually introducing small tears in that muscle, right? And it's through the process of repair that muscle not only heals, but the result of the rupture and the repair is that muscle is stronger. And And that is true of relationship, and I'm seeing it in your faces, right? So y'all have, and rupture in relationship is as common as a cough, right? I mean, it's as common as walking down the hallway. It just happens. Just because you have that rupture in the relationship in the moment that's not a bad thing. And in fact, man, what I love to kind of turn the tables. Can we look at these ruptures as opportunities to grow our relationship? Man, how powerful would that be? Something that we run into every day and say, hey, here's our chance. I recognize I may be a little Pollyannish there, but.
I mean, I'm surprised we've had 3 guys go.
Right? I was thinking the same thing.
Because today's just perfect. Married perfectly.
My wife and I found each other after failed marriages. And one thing that we didn't know was that both of us had a lot of knots.
Yeah.
That were left over from those failed relationships.
Yeah.
And it was rough.
Indeed.
And it's still a little bit of a bumpy ride. The knots do seem to be coming looser.
Right.
As we learn to trust one another.
Yeah.
I've got one that bothers me and has bothered me for the last 25 years almost. On our first wedding anniversary, we had a dinner reservation, and we're going to go out and have a really good time and celebrate our first year marriage together. Now, my knot for my first marriage was that I had a very controlling borderline personality complex on the other side of the car from me back then.
Yeah.
And her appointment at the hairdresser was taking longer than expected. And I'm outside, what's going on here? What is going on here? And she came out. I was already so worked up. I didn't see how beautiful she was.
Ah, wow.
All I could think was, you're going to make us late. And every time I think that, I just want to die.
Yeah.
Because I didn't recognize how beautiful she was, how much work she had put into it for me.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping this public confession will go a long ways for receiving that knot.
Yeah. Because the truth is, we're out of that anxiety and the urgency of the moment where you were frustrated, angry, tied to that knot of your story long before y'all even met, right? Certainly before you married, right? And this is, in some sense, one of those sober conversations, although it's a public one, right? But this is more akin to what you truly feel about your wife and how you truly see her, which is beautiful, right? Yeah. That's a little bit of that connecting conversation. Thank you for being vulnerable in that. Yeah.
One of the things that my wife and I sometimes struggle with is tone. So we're not necessarily in disagreement about what's being said, or even misinterpreting what's being said, but it's how it's being said.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, so like, watch your tone. Right? Stop tone policing. You know, because like what you're feeling, right? If you're stressed, angry, upset about something totally different.
Yeah.
How you say something, body language, tone of voice, etc. We sometimes have to like take a step back and like we've learned to recognize that and say like, hey, you know, I understand what you're saying, but the way you're saying it to me right now, you know, we're in a fight. You know?
Yeah.
And one of those things that I was thinking about from last week, the rope example that Levi and Heather gave, is, you know, you guys tied a rope between the two of you, but in reality, as human beings, we've got 1,000 ropes attached to us in all different ways, whether it's work, family, spouse, children, you know, you name it. So like, my tone can be a result of any number of those ropes being knotted, you know, being disrupted or whatever. But then we always, you I always take it out on the rope that's most, closest to me, and that comes from comes from tone. For us, a lot of times, misunderstanding. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And tone, I'm sorry, were you done? Yeah. I love that you're bringing up one of the things that we find. Why am I tongue tied? What's the old phrase that 90% or 80%, I don't know what the statistic is, of communication is nonverbal, right? So much of what we communicate with one another is not what we're saying. It's expression on the face. It's powerful, right? Posture, turning away and showing someone your back is one of the most hurtful things that you can do to someone whom you love, right? Looking at the phone. Tone, right, is one of those things, right? And I lost my train of thought because my wife is in the audience and we often talk about the phone and I just threw you under the bus. Sorry. Yeah. Did we have another?
So you have a minute over here, I know.
I just feel like we need to hear from a woman. No.
Thank you.
Well, I think a lot of times, when I have to say something and bring up an emotion in me, an example would be the, defensiveness or anger. And sometimes it helps to really ask God to help you get to the bottom of what's going on.
Yes.
Why do I get this emotion when that happens? Or he says that, where, you have to dig deeper into yourself.
Yeah.
And say, okay, oh, I know I feel like that because maybe my first husband was whatever. But it's nothing that he does, but maybe it came from your childhood, or maybe it came
Indeed.
from an event, and it's good to pray about it.
Yeah. We were of the same mind because that's exactly what I was thinking and lost a moment ago with tone, right? What is it in our story that tone actually triggers something? It touches that raw place. So that curiosity, one of my big words in counseling is curiosity. Man, I want to be curious about that, right? And I know I see the response, right? But I want to be curious about what's underneath that. And in that curiosity, we can have a better conversation about what's going on, yeah. Because oftentimes, no, it's not. It's not the person that you're talking to. It's actually something from some other place, some other time. Thank you. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to say anything that I didn't see with the hand up?
Yeah. Uh-oh.
It's always scary if your spouse raises their hand. Oh.
I should have put out a disclaimer on, right, instead of the 7 seasons.
Well, I think we're now, but we had a frustrating communication about towels.
Right? It's not about the towel.
I'm short, he's tired.
Yep.
And so I asked, we're in a little tiny home, and so we have limited space. So I got this towel rack, and I said, let's roll the towels. One, I can reach it that way, and two, they look pretty.
Yep.
Right? What he heard, I guess, he can fend for himself, but what I think he heard was, you're telling me I don't know how to fold towels.
Mm.
So he, as we're doing laundry, folds it like a square, not fold them.
Yep.
And I'm thinking these squares just grow, and I'm not going to be able to reach the top. So I asked again, can you please roll the towels? Now the third time comes around, and I'm frustrated now.
Yeah.
I've already said it twice. I shouldn't have to say it again. But we got marriage counseling, and we're still working on things. But I think communication in general is our biggest issue, and we're going on failed marriages with 3 years in our marriage. So it's learning to get rid of bad habits from the and grow together, I think. But I think we can solve any problem as long as we can figure out how to communicate it and ask for God's help in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I heard folded towels.
Okay.
It wasn't like, hey, folded this thing, it's just
Fold the towels.
so I folded the towels. And then it's folded towels, like, hey, you did it wrong. Towels are folded. What's wrong? It's learning to understand how, because to me, folded towels are just folded towels, it's not going to work. It's important to her to do it a specific way.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that at first. It was just mission accomplished. It's how it's spoken.
Yeah.
So it's taking the time to actually listen and understand that it's not necessarily important to you to do something a certain way, but if it matters to her, then it should matter to you as well.
Yeah.
And it's a learning process, and we're still learning, but
Absolutely. Right. And I don't know if you heard my comment as you started there was, it's not about the towels, right? Yeah. Because it's not about the way that it's folded. And in fact, what I heard you saying is that, yeah, I did what she asked me to do. So this doesn't sound like it's part of y'all's story, but one posture that we can have when somebody tells me how to fold a towel, which is something I've done for 30 years, 40, however many years, I know how to fold a towel, is that feels controlling. And I'm not gonna, right, depending on your story, right, it feels like she's trying to control me, and I'm not gonna yield to that, right? And then it becomes this power struggle, right? And yeah, what I hear in your story is not control. It's, hey, this is, and in the end, it's not about that towel. It's that it was a genuine ask, right? And when you chose not to do that, it feels like you don't really care. Ouch, right? And so, and you completely missed that. And I want to be careful because I'm not in counseling right now. And I also don't want to give you the impression that everything becomes this walking on eggshells, right? And that's the whole point, actually, is that when you feel that walking on eggshells, that's your indicator. Hey, we've got to let's work on that, right? This is an opportunity to work on repair in our relationship. Man, let's dig into it, right? Instead of 70 years later. I love, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Are there any other thoughts or questions? In the wings, my peripheral vision is not picking up. So.
I'd like to hear from some of the women, but prefer to. I might set it back.
Y'all know? Uh-oh. You asked for it. Love it.
Don't worry, it's more of a question than a statement.
Awesome.
So, you talked about the seasons of marriage.
Yeah.
How would you look at, let's just say you're in one season, or, like you're in conflict and growth, how can you help to go to the next season of being faithfulness, or the next season of renewal and legacy? Like, how can that look?
Yeah.
How can you get from that one season to the next?
Yeah. And full disclosure, I'm not married to these seasons, right? There's a lot of fluctuating, right? As you look at this particular description of kind of life progression, you're going to find yourself in a place where you feel very healthy in relationship, and maybe up in the renewal and legacy space, where you're mentoring another couple, right? You're pouring into another couple's lives, and that feels really natural and appropriate, right? And then there's going to be this moment where the tone shows up, and you find yourself feeling like a little kid again. Like, I don't believe I just lost my stuff with my wife or my husband about something so silly, about the towels, right? And what I'm feel like I'm dodging your question. What I'm married to more than anything is the idea of recognizing that, identifying that disconnection in the moment, right? Or in whatever season you're in, and then working toward connection. That's a lifelong thing. In the seasons, it just looks different in every different season. And again, there's kind of a flow back and forth depending on what's going on. I feel like I successfully dodged your question. If you have a follow-up, let me know.
You okay if I speak to that just a little bit?
Please, yeah, thank you, Heather.
So, I think, too, if I'm understanding, like getting stuck in one of those seasons.
Oh.
Is that for you?
That is,
It's for you.
that's my reminder. Oh, no. I set that as so I wouldn't go long.
Oh, awesome. So, like getting stuck in one of those seasons, I think is the heart of the question, if I'm understanding right. And like, how do you come out if you find yourself spiraling in one of those seasons? And I'll make a plug now because I think Paul's an incredible couples therapist. But sometimes it's like that getting that outside perspective is kind of like a bit of what we talked about last week, that if you could fix it on your own, you probably would have done it by now. So some sort of loop, some sort of habit, some sort of cycle has been or is being created. And so if you find yourself in a thing that you guys are not able to yourselves step out of, step through, and a lot of times just getting that third neutral party that can kind of bring perspective can be very useful. But a huge part of it is being able to mutually recognize, like, hey, we're kind of in this place and we don't want to be. And then going even with what you have in common. Like, these are the things that we agree on. Let's give as much energy to that as we can while we either seek help, while the Lord leads us, while we seek mentorship, whatever it is. So there's my version of sort of an answer, but please elaborate, Mr. Couples Therapist.
I may need to wait for another day to elaborate too much because I think we're close to time. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, trying to find my thoughts again. I don't want to step away, but I also don't want to keep y'all here longer than I committed to, or I committed y'all to. Let me pick up with slide 31 there, Levi. So I'd like to take just a few minutes to wrap up. For a closing thought, I've approached this address this morning more like a workshop, not like a Bible study, in part because I'm a counselor. I'm not a preacher. We didn't exposit scripture this morning. With that said, I have studied the scripture associated with this workshop quite a bit through a lot of seasons, and I anticipate in it. I know from conversations already that we had this morning that many of you have as well. Matt, actually, he gave me the verse for this workshop, and he nailed it. And I'd like to take a look at that verse, John 10:10. And this is how it reads. Jesus is speaking, and this is what he says. He says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Let me read that again. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Jesus came that you may have life and have it abundantly. So can I point out that this is not simply two sides of a conflict, two sides of the same coin, right? It's not a balanced fight. It's not yin and yang. The thief is all about tying knots and destroying relationships and killing and stealing every chance he gets. But the thief, the enemy, Satan, his dominion is created. He's not on par with our Creator. His killing is not equal and opposite to God's living. Abundant, flourishing life is the plan for every believer in Jesus. And that's what we're fighting for in all the conversations that I heard, and even now as we go from here. That's what we're fighting for. We are his representation of abundant life to a lost and a dying world. And I encourage you to consider how to love him with your marriage and your relationships. Full knowing that your love for one another is a spit in the eye to the enemy. But even more than that, it's an embrace of our Heavenly Father, of your Father. So untangle the rope with him as well. These knots, we've got them with God, right? They're there as well. So don't believe the lie of the status quo. God defines the direction that you're going. The enemy doesn't define it. And his intention for you is good. And we know that because he loves us with a perfect and an everlasting love. Okay, now I'm beginning to sound like a preacher, so I'm going to stop. But I encourage you to consider what those connections look like with your spouse. Another, pastor talked about, we have connections with all kinds of people, right? And with God. So consider ways that you might be able to reach for connection. And may God bless you to seek, as you seek to love him in your relationships. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for your engagement. And God bless. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Paul, appreciate it. And just a quick announcement, next week, on the 30th, we won't be having the marriage workshop. Our last marriage workshop will be on December 7th, right? So next week, no marriage workshop. The third marriage workshop will pick up on December 7th. And then later on in January, we'll announce that we've got another 3-part workshop series coming up as well. So thank you again, Paul, and Jess's counseling for being here.
Yeah, thank you.